Welcome everyone, Costin here with a campaign overview guide for Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires for Grand Cathay and the two legendary lord choices that this faction does have currently in Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. It's worth knowing that Grand Cathay hasn't had any DLC so far, and certainly the faction is incomplete. However, is certainly a good faction. It's not the strongest in the game. It's not among the strongest factions in the game if you're playing as either Miao Ying or Zhao Ming, but it's certainly above average in a lot of ways, be it economy, military. They do have quite a few things going for them. Let's talk about the strengths and then I'll talk about the weaknesses, and I'll try and make this video shorter than many other videos that I've had on this channel on Warhammer 3 because not everyone wants to listen to a 1 hour long discussion, which I could certainly make this video about. So one of the chief advantages that Grand Cathay has is that they have a good economy that crucially can scale upwards. How does it scale? Well, specifically with the Goods Emporium, which is a yin building, you get 6% income benefit from trade tariffs. And this is for every single one of them. And on top of that, related to the economy, though not directly, you do get things like the tea parlor or the lumber mill, as well as certain other benefits. You have good growth, you have good economy, you have various buildings, and scalability across the entirety of your empire. This is what makes a good faction, having that economic scalability when it comes to their economy and their growth. And that's something that Cathay does have. Mainly with yin buildings, though certainly some yang buildings also have their own benefits. In particular, I would argue when it comes to control, when it comes to the yang sanctuary. Though yang economic buildings, the trade exchange, can generate a pretty substantial amount of money in its own right, though it won't have the trade tariff benefit. But yin and yang brings up one of the biggest issues that Cathay does have, the balance between yin and yang. This is decided by three things: research, buildings, and lords, as well as heroes, of course, which I would include under lords. So every single hero, lord, building, or economic building, or many buildings, have either yin or yang. Much of the research tree has yin or yang benefits. And the reason this is important is you want to achieve balance between yin and yang. But it is very frustrating having to manage it. It's very easy to get out of balance, to get out of harmony between yin and yang and lose the benefits that it provides. Basically, if you maintain balance, you get benefits to diplomatic relations with Cathay factions, construction benefits, growth, income from both yin and yang buildings, control +8 in all provinces, and an army ability for every single one of your armies. If you get out of balance, you start losing a lot of control, as well as having your economy being affected for your side. So for instance, if you have a lot of yin, you're going to have some significant economic downsides with yin building, as well as -6 control, which can certainly lead your empire into chaos. But that's the empire side. Then we got to talk about the army. Army-wise, you have the Jade Warrior line, the Jade Warrior crossbowmen, the Jade Warrior with halberds, the crossbowmen with shields. Those are pretty good units. You don't have the best cavalry in the world, although they can certainly hold their own. And crucially, like the infantry, the cavalry can be pretty heavily armored, as well as having pretty decent leadership. This is important because it helps you with your auto-resolve and helps you in battle overall. It means units will take less damage due to the high armor. Cathay also has some pretty good artillery, specifically with the fire rain rockets, the grand cannons for taking down walls, and they also have some decent gunpowder units. Actually, the Iron Hail gunners, given the current situation with gunpowder units, might be one of the better ones in the game. Yes, they have short range, but given the issues that gunpowder units face at long range anyway, that strength is not really realized. So having a short range but high damage unit like the Iron Hail gunners can be very good. For a long range option, you of course have the crane gunners, which can be pretty devastating if you can get those line of sight. For higher end units, you possess the Celestial Dragon units, which are certainly some of the better infantry units in the game. Though they won't hold against something like Chosen, though the Celestial Dragon Crossbowmen are some of the best range units flat out in the entire game. Bit expensive though. And then you do have some special units. The Whooshing War Compass, though that's pretty useless because any Astromancer can use that as a mount, so you don't need it. But crucially, you do have the Terracotta Sentinel. Slow, but extremely durable and capable of holding a line like no one else. When it comes to the unit choices, there's no glaring weakness that Cathay has. Yes, the roster is limited due to a lack of DLC, but there's no major issues. That cannot be said about the Lord or Hero choices. The Lord choices are pretty mediocre, and in particular, you may never want to bother with the Lord Magistrate and just use Dragon Blood Lords. But, although these are decent caster Lords, you are effectively lacking a good melee choice, with the exception of your Legendary Lords, which are dragons. So you're not going to have a really good melee combatant for most of your armies. I mean, Terracotta Sentinels can provide that, but put one of those against Scarbrand's going to eat it alive. However, it's even worse, I'd argue, for the hero choices. See, the problem is, Alchemists and Astromancers, they're good caster lords, especially the Alchemists. They do provide a lot. But there is a glaring weakness when it comes down to it. And let me just find an army over here. I believe I have one down here. There is a glaring weakness when it comes to that. While the Alchemists provide mobility, which is always useful, and various buffs, they are still a caster lord. And the Astromancers, well, they're not really that great either. They're actually worse, I'd argue, than the Alchemists in most situations. The bigger problem is you're lacking any good replenishment option with a hero, and that can be pretty crucial. One of the biggest benefits a faction like Kislev has, for all the problems they have, economy, diplomacy, starting position, the one major significant advantage Kislev has is that they have incredible replenishment through Patriarchs, and they can get a lot of them. You have good caster heroes, or one really good caster hero, but you don't have the ability to get good replenishment. So even though you have high armored units, which can certainly auto-resolve a lot of battles, you won't be able to recover from those battles very easily. There is the Yin Lodge, of course, which can provide replenishment and control, but even this 9% at tier 3 doesn't hold a candle to the significantly higher casualty replenishment Patriarch or other heroes for other factions can provide. So you're at a major disadvantage when it comes to that. I'll talk about the caravan system in just a moment. One of the ways to overcome the issue of replenishment is, of course, to use the Whooshing Compass. Now, the compass is a great benefit. The Celestial Lake and the Great Bastion benefits are pretty substantial. Dragon Emperor's Wrath, not so much. Control, yeah, it can be useful to have the 4 control from it, but having 15% income benefit, wins of magic, and growth at max level, pretty substantial. Or, if you're going with the Great Bastion, having that extra casualty replenishment up to 10% casualty replenishment can, to a degree, make up for the deficiency you're going to have there. The problem is with this, the problem with using the compass for replenishment to overcome that is you're going to miss out on the income. And while your income is good, it's not the best in the world. And it's not like you have a free ride playing as Grand Cathay. You have Skaven, in particular, one of the most dangerous Skaven Legendary Lords in the entire game to deal with. And then you have rowdy neighbors to the west to deal with. The compass, 2 of the benefits are pretty good. 2 of the benefits, kind of useless from my perspective. I would generally not bother with the Warpstone Desert or the Dragon Emperor's Wrath currently, given the current situation in the game. But one of the biggest issues that Cathay has, believe it or not, it's not the issues with heroes or the issues with the yin or yang system. Rather, the biggest problem Cathay actually does have in their campaign plan is this: suitable climate. You can colonize desert, like for instance with Zhao Ming, you can get desert, savanna, and temperate. So you can take the entirety of the empire if you so desire, but the problem is getting there, because the territory along the way will not be the most pleasant climate to colonize. That's one of the biggest issues. In fact, you can't even use all the territory in Cathay itself. I believe the situation for Miao Ying is pretty similar when it comes to this. I might be proven wrong, but the limitations in the amount of territory you can take certainly prevents Cathay from establishing a global empire. Because they have the scale, they have the armies for it, despite the lack of replenishment. They have the economy for it, they just can't take a lot of ground. Then there's the situation with caravans. Caravans can be great, absolutely, without a doubt in my mind. The problem is, you might end up in a war with many of the factions along the caravan route, and if you do, then that situation is going to go very badly for you very, very quickly, and you may end up losing the caravan and all the benefits that it can bring. There are tangible benefits, items that you can acquire. Speaking about items, you don't have quest battles for your legendary lords, so you're missing out on the benefits that those quest battles might bring you. You can get the items, and you can get the income to make up for it via the caravans that you're going to send along, but sometimes just being able to click a button, fight a very easy battle for a quest battle, and just get a lot of gold, temporary replenishment, can be pretty useful. Not having that is a bit of the downside. Not the major one, but Cathay doesn't necessarily have any major issues. It's just an accumulation of smaller and smaller problems that they deal with in their campaign. But they're certainly the best faction, the best race that Creative Assembly introduced in Warhammer 3 by far and away, because of the scalability, their army roster, their legendary lore choices. Hell, Cathay itself is one of the best areas in the entire campaign. You might not have a campaign outside of Cathay because of the limitations of terrain, but the campaign in Cathay is one of the best that the game has to offer. To talk about the two legendary lords, let's start with Miao Ying, the Storm Dragon. I consider her the weaker choice out of the two legendary lords. Some people can argue the Skyjunk is a better artillery choice. I personally prefer the Fire Rain rockets that Zhao Ming starts with. But that's just an army situation. You can always change that throughout the course of the campaign as you play it. When it comes to faction-wide benefits, she does get 20% extra ammunition to all of her armies. While that is substantial, without a doubt, as well as the leadership benefit when fighting against Demons of Chaos. I'm not sure if that includes Norska or Warriors of Chaos, probably not based on the wording of it. But while these benefits are certainly significant, I do feel like her brother just ends up getting the better card. She does have, her skill line includes diplomatic relations with 40 plus 40 with Cathay, control local province, melee defense debuff for enemy units in close range, some casting benefits, benefits against Warriors of Chaos, Demons of Chaos, as well as other range benefits. She also does have a fairly substantial upkeep benefit for missile infantry units, but this is only for her army, which mattered a great deal in the base game of Warhammer 3 and the Realms of Chaos. Matters far less in Immortal Empires, where you'll be having a dozen armies running around the campaign map. Still a significant early game, but not so much later game. And besides, she's at a significant economic disadvantage compared to her brother because of the various benefits that he gets, in particular the caravan benefit. Speaking about her starting position, let's just dive into that. She does have the rebels over here that control Nanli, as well as the entirety of the lands of stone and steel. Now, one benefit that Miao Ying does have is she could potentially wipe out the caravan here from Po Mei and get a significant cash benefit early on in her campaign. Something her brother may not so easily achieve. Besides, she could also raid the caravan from Weijin and get even more money from that. Or even a caravan from the Imperial Wardens, though I'm not sure I would pick a fight with them, given the fact that they do control the Great Bastion, and you may not want to take over those duties yourself. The Bastion defenders can do a great job on their own for a fairly long period of time at holding back the tide of chaos coming from the north, specifically Village, who no longer can just teleport over the Great Bastion. They actually have to attack it and seize it. And given the behavior of the AI when it comes to attacking settlements, you're in a pretty good position defensively, at least from the north. The rebels are not going to hold a candle towards against you. They only start with 2 minor armies, one of which you'll destroy very early on. But then you get into the Armageddon level threat that Deathmaster snitches. The problem of facing any Skaven faction comes down to the fact that they'll have a lot of armies very early on in the campaign. And there is a limit to how fast you can rush Snitch. Expect to fight some heavy battles if you're playing as Miao Ying against Snitch. He'll most certainly take the entirety of the province of the Forest of the Moon. And Village might be able to push through the north before you can stop him, before you can kill Snitch and then stop Village. And then, of course, the east, you also have Loki or Felhart. I'd say the biggest priority beyond dealing with the rebels, deal with Snitch, deal with Loki, and then decide how big of a threat Village is. You can devote a significant amount of time pacifying the north. I'd recommend burning it to the ground, just leaving it in ruins, leaving this entire area in ruin, or just funneling money into the Imperial Wardens if you have it, or helping them when it counts, but keeping them alive so that they can actually build up the Great Bastion themselves. If any get falls, you can then take it. I would not confederate with them very early on. It's a trap you can easily fall into. Don't do it because they'll have the money to spend on building up the Great Bastion. They might not choose the best structures, but you'll have a trading partner and they will get it to at least a higher tier. Also remember that on higher difficulty, the AI does have substantially better growth than you, so they'll be able to get these settlements to a higher level far faster than you can. After that, well, confederations with the south, dealing with the vampire counts over here in the Nongchang Basin, and then potentially coming down here to deal with Nakai. It's worth saying that Zhao Ming himself will be building up some significant military forces of his own. In fact, he generally does so. So does Miao Ying, though she does tend to suffer from the numerous foes she has to deal with, whereas Zhao Ming is in an actually safer position, which benefits the AI because it gives the AI breathing space and can make him a very, very useful ally. The only vulnerable spot beyond the threat that Snitch presents is this pass right here. Specifically, Greases. Greases might pose a threat, and then, of course, you've got to also consider the issue of Grimgore, who most certainly is going to occupy the entirety of the northern mountains of Morn and potentially declare war on you. Village might also try and be sneaky and come through here, through the northern part of the mountains of Morn, and attack you from the west. The rebel faction in Xiangyang, they're not going to be much of an issue. Though avoid making any kind of good diplomatic deals with them because it's just going to piss off Zhao Ming, who starts a war with them. And that's really all you need to know about Miao Ying. Snitch is the big issue. My advice when dealing with Skaven, try and take down individual armies when they're vulnerable. Let's say they've just taken a settlement, they've occupied it, it's just one army on its own. That's when you attack. You don't want to fight 4 Skaven armies at once, especially because they can ambush you. If you have to move through territory where they might attack you, do so in camp stance, because that will prevent ambushes from happening. If you have to move with 2 armies, especially so. Finally, to talk about Zhao Ming, he is the better of the 2 legendary lords of Grand Cathay. But why is that? Well, his starting position is certainly not one of them. Yayu Port is a capital city that you need to take pretty early on. You can do it within 2 turns, but you do start a war against a faction that does occupy a pretty good amount of territory. Also worth saying that Warpstone Desert, where they have Xiangyang, is going to cause attrition whenever you try and move through it. So it is annoying having to take all of this territory. But Those issues aside, Zhao Ming certainly is in a great position. In the base game, he's the worst of the two, because even though he has a lot of good bonuses, the Great Bastion tends to fall. You get Norscan Marauders and Azazels storming through. That's less of an issue in Immortal Empires. So whereas in Realms of Chaos you would want to play Miao Ying to prevent the Bastion from being overrun, here you have the luxury of playing Zhao Ming without that happening. When we're talking about faction-wide benefits, he gets a 20% maximum cargo capacity for caravans. That means a lot more money from caravans throughout the course of your campaign, provided you can keep the trade routes open, which might involve some diplomatic dealings. But he's actually well suited for that through some of his skills, through his special skill line. He does get 5 hero recruit rank for alchemists, a minus 25% upkeep for ogre mercenary units, which is actually useless given the way ogre mercenaries work currently in the game. Certainly needs an update. But he does have a very substantial benefit of 15 armor for all melee units. So your Jade Warriors and your Celestial Dragon Guard tend to be far more powerful. And hell, any melee unit. When we're thinking about melee units, don't ignore the fact that it's not just melee infantry units. No, there's a lot more over here than just something like that. When we're thinking about Cathay's roster of units. Not sure if the Terracotta Sentinel is affected by it, and I don't have a settlement to show that. I believe it would be, however. Now, another crucial benefit for him, while he's lacking that ammo benefit, sure, and that can limit your range power or can cause you to run out of ammo in crucial battles, which is always a concern, he does get a major benefit in terms of the magic item drop chance. It's for himself, but this means you will get more items, far more items, to be able to equip the various lords and heroes of your armies. This is crucial. It's only for him, but he's always going to be at the front. He's going to fight the most battles of any lord of a campaign. And just having that increased by 100% is pretty substantial. The upkeep of minus 25% for melee units is also pretty good for the army, though it's nowhere near as comparable as his sister's benefit. The true benefit for him is actually diplomatically. He only gets a plus 20 diplomatic relations with Cathay, but you'll always have good relations with Cathay, so that's not really too important. It might be harder to confederate Miao Ying if you're playing Zhao Ming than it is in the opposite direction. But that 40 diplomatic relations with the Ogre Kingdoms can really help protect your trade routes. You get the diplomatic deal with Greasus, you're going to be a pretty reliable ally that you can have on your side. And you can make non-aggression pacts basically with every Ogre faction that you encounter, largely because of this benefit. It is substantial. Then you get hero capacity to alchemists, more hero recruit rank to alchemists. So you're looking at alchemists being recruited at level 8 in your campaign because of this benefit. And then on top of that, or is it 7? Either way. More importantly, you also have regeneration in your army for him. So he can stay in dragon form and he just will not die in the vast majority of battles. On top of that, he gets damage resistance to allies in region, in the radius, and he also gets an additional 10 armor for melee units on top of the 15. So you're looking at his melee units in his army getting 25 armor. That is substantial. Plus 15 weapon strength for melee units. And given the melee meta that Warhammer 3 has certainly moved towards, this is all really good. And it's not like his range units are going to be weaker. Actually, far from it. They might even end up being stronger, because you do also have the Master of Alchemy benefit for him that you should take into consideration. So yeah, Zhao Ming, certainly the more powerful of the two, though his starting position can leave something to be desired. But you do take Hayo Port, you do take the Skaven out in Zhenwu, and then you take Shangyang, the Shrine of the Alchemist, and Tai Tzu. And then you encounter Snitch. Fighting Snitch, always a problem, absolutely, but at least you won't have too much exposed territory to deal with. You fight him one turn at a time, you take Singpo, you take Village of the Moon, you take all of this territory. If you could rush Snitch before he becomes too powerful, then you might be able to completely eliminate him. Specifically, if you could take out Snitch before he takes Kunlan, that's great. And worth knowing that the greenskins here, for them, it's a minor settlement. When you take it, becomes a major settlement. Yeah, it's a bit weird with the Savage Orcs like that. Once Snitch is eliminated, Lokir, you shouldn't have to worry about Village. Though if you can get the Imperial Road, then maybe some portions of Lands of Stone and Steel, if Miao Ying hasn't done that already, maybe trade that to her. But if you can take the Imperial Road, that will further strengthen you. And after that, dealing with the Vampire Counts, confederating the Jade Custodians. And eventually, after Snitch, Lokir, and the Vampire Counts here are dealt with, you'll be dealing with Nakai. You'll end up in a war with him. He's probably going to significantly weaken the Burning Wind Nomads. Another plan that you could go for, certainly, would be to declare war on the Burning Wind Nomads. Though you can just as easily get an agreement with these guys and get really good diplomatic relations pretty quickly in your campaign. Long term for any Cathayan faction, here are your choices. You can move over here in the Dragon Isles. Take them. The territory here isn't the best, absolutely, but it can provide a launch pad for an invasion of the Southlands. And while the jungle isn't great, the desert can be colonized. Or alternatively, you can bite the bullet, so to speak, and march an invasion force of the Empire. The problem with that particular plan is it will put you in a situation where you're likely going to end up at war with a lot of the factions. And I admit, I don't know what happens if you invade the Empire as Cathay. I've never done it. It's far away from... It's far away from Cathay in both campaigns. It is a major issue with the Cathayan campaign, the limitation on expansion that you have. An alternative plan, if you want to go for it, there is a sea route, or there are two sea routes over here on the east, and these will land you over here. And you could potentially take the territory of the Isthmus of Lustria. Take out Hexoatl, though don't expect that to be an easy fight. But some of the territory here is colonizable. The jungle, however, is not. And if you do that, if you pick that fight with Lustria, you're going to fight all of Lustria. Specifically Hexoatl, Itza, and the Cult of Sotik, if you do decide that. But at least some of the territory here is colonizable. Or, if you really want to push for it, you could head over here for Estalia, Tylea, and the Western Border Princes. Limitations on expansion in the long term certainly are a thing when you're playing a Cathayan campaign. I would not recommend playing either Legendary Lore for a long-term world domination campaign, just because of the limitations on territory. But for a short-term campaign, like 70 turns or so, it can be a great deal of fun. Costin here signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, enable notifications, and stay tuned for more.